Good evening. How's everybody doing? We are going to have a great time tonight. I'm going to get you out of here. What time is it that you're normally out of this one?
3 hours.
Somebody give me a number. What time? 7:30. 7:30. Wow. Okay. Well, guess what? If I get you out of here a little bit early, will you be okay with that? Yeah. In corporate America, when we say when we can give back a team, 10 minutes because we exit a meeting early, everybody loves you, right? So I'm going to try to do that. So thank you so much for coming. I love that this room is so packed, and I hope that you'll stay with me the whole time. I'm going to try to engage you, ask questions, so be prepared for me to call on you. I might say, hey, the lady in the blue long sleeve t-shirt, okay? So pay attention. We're also going to watch some videos to keep it interactive, and I look forward to this with you. To kick it off, John said something I think is important about volunteering, and that brings me to talk about Jim Wood. Does anyone know who Jim Wood is? Somebody? Bueller? Anyone? Jim Wood is a man who sponsors a lot of activities at Clayton State University, and as a philanthropist, he provides funding for this very presentation, enabling you to come and learn from various speakers. So I hope that you'll be inspired when you are highly successful with your excellent education, that you will think about how can I serve others, either through your time, through volunteering, or through your money by funding special programs. So keep that in mind, it's critical. And I do want to give thanks to Clayton State University for giving me this opportunity, and to Jim Wood and all his support. So we've been bombarded lately by a lot of headlines that sort of relate around the topic of gender. Somebody tell me kind of what you think I'm referring to. What was that? Yes, sexual harassment, right, is the biggie, right? Way in the back, blue jacket, you were going to say?
Yes, the Me Too movement.
Me Too, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The thing about all those conversations is they can make us very uncomfortable. Now, as young people in college, maybe not as much, but as professionals in the work world, it's very uncomfortable, and men and women don't quite know how to deal with it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The key to my presentation today is to tell you that we've got to sort of get a new toolbox to deal with all of these, rising conversations that we've never really had in a professional setting. Maybe even you with your professors, sometimes it might seem weird, these topics come up, especially if they're mixed gender groups. And so what I'm going to talk about today are what are the ways that we as contributors, whether it be at school or at work, can leverage tools that create the kind of cultures and inclusive environments where everyone, regardless of your gender or race or ethnicity, can feel included and feel like their contributions are worth it. And what does that do for organizations? It creates high-performance teams, right? When everyone feels included and valued, they're going to contribute cool ideas that can help the organization grow. Make sense? So we're going to tell you about how to optimize 100% of the workforce, men and women, to achieve their full potential. Okay, so we're going to cover a few topics. We're going to cover some headlines, which we just touched on a little bit. We're going to cover the facts, because at the end of the day, let's try to get emotion out of it and just learn the facts, because you might have a better shot of influencing change, whether it be at school or at home or in your organizations, if you can present some facts. We're going to talk about solutions, because it doesn't matter what the problem is if we don't have solutions. And lastly, I'm going to give you some actions that you can apply right away today. Sound good? Okay, so breaking news. So we touched on a little bit of the Me Too movement, right? Sexual harassment, all these news personalities, that were also called to attention. So it all started with Gretchen Carlson. Do you guys remember that name? She was at Fox News, and she came out and, basically filed a lawsuit against the head of Fox News and sort of started the whole thing. It was back in the summer of 2016, I believe. And so here's just a brief overview of some of the big headlines. Of course, the biggest one was, who's the movie star mogul? Harvey Weinstein, right? So that got a lot of attention. And interestingly enough, Time chose Person of the Year as this whole Me Too movement and the women who, were brave enough to come out. Now, more recently was the award ceremony. Does everybody remember Oprah? You heard in the news, right? She came out, she gave a speech. She started another movement, Time's Up. Now, I really like this because it's kind of like saying, hey, you know what? Time's up on silence. Time's up on waiting. Time's up on tolerating discrimination, harassment, and abuse. And I say time's up on tolerating cultures, whether it's at school or at work, that don't enable everyone to achieve their potential, right? Men and women. And sometimes people think it's this gender equality thing, but it's really just people equality, right? Making sure that you are able to have all of the team feel like they are valued and can contribute. Everyone wins when everyone has an equal shot at advancing and being promoted and rising upward. But it's not black and white, right? I showed you one side so far, but there's been some alternative viewpoints. Now I'm going to ask you to be brave, and let's see who has some courage, right? Not everyone is agreeing with all of the things I told you, right? There's an opposing or different point of view. Can somebody talk about what you might have heard some people saying, both men and women, around this whole Me Too and Time's Up stuff? Anyone? Yes.
Women are initiating. It may be just by physical appearance that you have on, maybe suggesting that you are wanting more.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're right on.
Conversations or something.
Absolutely. So sometimes people say, oh, well, the victim, quote unquote, is, participating or suggesting or causing confusion. Thank you for that. Who else? Okay.
Why do they wait so long?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And you may remember back during the election, I hate to kind of bring this up because it's so, but it was a big thing when things came out, when people were accusing Trump about things, or even the judge guy in Alabama. All I heard was, yeah, why do they wait so long? And what's interesting is my own husband, I'm like major, equality person, but he has some friends that, aren't as enlightened, I like to say. And he'd come home and he'd be like, yeah, but why are they waiting so long, And you have to kind of educate people. And that was last year, but now as more and more people come and tell their story, you can kind of understand, right, what a woman goes through, the pressures that you go through at work or in your organizations that cause you to not speak up. What are some other things you're hearing that sort of the opposing view? Yes?
The culture has changed, and that's why they're coming out now versus prior?
I would agree completely. And it also has to do with the numbers, right? There's power in numbers. So it's hard when you're alone and you're the sole speaker. But when other people are doing it, then you feel more comfortable. A great example of that is there was, I'm sure you remember this, the Olympics doctor, Nasser, right? It's interesting. When the judge said that the victims could come and present make their statements in court, only like maybe 50 said that they would come. But as they all stepped up and told their story, what happened? Yeah, do you guys remember kind of roughly what the end count ended up being?
125.
Yeah, right, it was over 100. More than double, almost 3 times the amount that they originally wanted to come out. There you go, 157? 167. And so you see that, those women that weren't going to come forward, did it not happen to them? No, but they needed some help. As to your point, the culture changed, in fact, that they felt like they could be included to tell their story. One more, any other things that you remember hearing? Yes?
That some women are taking advantage of the movement and, I guess, accusing men of things that they're not.
That's right. And, all these conversations are the things that we need to have with each other. And again, even though it makes us uncomfortable, it's so good that they're happening. Just this morning at the gym, I go and work out in the mornings, and it's a group of women that we work out on weights. And our coach, they started having this conversation. Some snowboarder just won a medal. Did you guys hear that?
Yeah,
Shaun White. And what was the story? I didn't read it, but what's the story?
Drag the flag on the ground.
He what?
Oh, there's a couple things coming out around it.
Well-
One, the flag hit the ground.
Okay,
But
sports-wise.
then He said something about what he did in the past under his younger days.
Yeah, so apparently some women are accusing her of sexual harassment things too. And so these ladies I work out with were saying, they're having an honest discussion where some were saying, well, I think, women tend to, take things too seriously, or they're misinterpreting things. And, other people were saying, well, I mean, it's the person, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? Sexual harassment is in the eye of the beholder of the person receiving it. If you feel uncomfortable, then you shouldn't be engaged in that type of behavior. So it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray, and so I'm just going to touch on a couple of the ones. This guy right here, his name's Garrison Keillor. I don't know if there's any NPR fans. Yeah, and so, he was another one that, came out, and actually I'll read this, right? He said, we should be careful not to make the world so fine and good that you and I can't enjoy living it. A world in which there's no sexual harassment at all is a world in which there will not be any flirtation. And so, right or wrong or, whatever, the key is that we have these conversations and talk about it, right? For me personally, I disagree with that, but I think where men and women can talk about it, it's good to understand the other person's point of view. Does anybody have any comment or anything that strikes them about that one? Another one was, do you guys remember Geraldo Rivera? All right, so he came out, this was around the Matt Lauer, and he used this terminology, criminalizing courtship. Right? And I can see how it can be scary and confusing for men, right? It's like, well, I mean, I'm attracted to this woman. I thought she was attracted to me, and so it gets really murky and muddy, right? My point of view is at work, you should be really careful because you don't want to end up getting cross signals like that, and it affects your working product, your work product, And even women, by the way, have opposing viewpoints. So this is an actress, I believe, from Europe. She's a French actress, Catherine Deneuve. Any French speakers here? Deneuve. And she said that, women may be unfairly, punishing men in a way, and that we have this new puritanism, right? That we expect everything to be squeaky clean. So there's lots of discussion, and I think that's so healthy and so important. So my takeaway for you would be, I hope that you can show some courage when people are talking about these things in the news, especially men. Engage men in the conversation and understand their point of view. Well, what do you think? And you should never judge people or make them feel like they're, you're making any value judgments against them. Let's just have a conversation because that solves everything. Now, one thing some people are saying is, I kid you not, right? Some men in corporate America are saying, I'm never going to be alone with a woman. I'm not inviting women to dinner or to any lunches without other people with me. I'm not going to be in a meeting where I'm alone with a woman. And so what they're saying is that this is going to have them avoid women. That's not the answer, right? I think that we have to have an honest dialogue. Things are already difficult for women to rise to senior leadership positions. If the men in power are going to start not inviting women, it's going to be terrible, right? So I think women need to work hard to make sure that we're including men. And it applies, you may think this is only work related, but it applies at school too. And I'll go through some examples, right? As you're in your work teams and your classes, how can we be on the lookout for any exclusionary type of behavior? Because I don't think that's the answer. Let's take a look at some of the facts, okay? Why and how can we optimize teams where we're including everyone and getting the best ideas? There are some studies, and this is just one of them, on something called collective intelligence. Would somebody help me out? What do you think that means, collective intelligence?
Maybe information from multiple parties, like different people.
Yes, right? Multiple parties, collective. Excellent. Anybody else want to chime in on collective intelligence, what you think that means? Do you think that if you have a group of the same types of thinkers and backgrounds versus a group of people of all kinds of thought processes and backgrounds, do you think one would outperform the other? Yes. Which one do you think? The diverse one, right? I mean, you guys really believe that. Do you really believe that?
Yes.
Right? And I think it seems pretty common sense, right? I mean, it's like not a leap to understand how that could be possible. But why then is it that in organizations of all kinds at the top, do you think they're diverse?
No?
Okay, I know how you feel. Yeah, they're not. And guess what? I was really surprised during my work at Show Me 50. I thought that institutions like education, academia, or nonprofit area, or places like hospitals, that they would be more equal at the top. But are they? No. It's every industry, every kind of discipline. But yet, what kills me is, academia, talk about intelligence, right? That's where all the studies are done. But yet, even there, we can't seem to break through gender diversity at the top, right? So let's look at this study. What this study did, and you can see down here the names of the people who did the study, and they've actually done this recurring study over a decade in all sorts of variety of ways, Carnegie Mellon, MIT, and Union College. And what they found was that when you look at teams, a group of people working together to solve a problem, one of the ways that diversity manifests itself into higher performing and better ideas is when there's more equal participation by the team members, right? So when you have a team of 10 people and they're participating more equally, they're going to come up with better ideas. Why do you think that would be? What are some of the things that lead people to participate more equally?
Well, if you eliminate titles, or eliminate levels of authority, then you level the playing field.
That's right. And what kind of things could make that happen? The culture, right? The culture of the group is in a way that enables everyone to feel valued and that they can contribute, right? So more equal participation happens more likely when there's different people who understand that, we can all work together. Another thing that defines collective intelligence of a group of diverse people is something called reading the mind with the eyes. This is a skill that's based on a test, and what they do is they say, hey, when I'm looking at you and your eyes, technically speaking, I can tell what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what's bothering you. And I'm able to include you more closely because I can read how you feel, okay? And it turns out, guess who's better at that skill? Men or women? Women, right? And this isn't just like myth. I mean, this was the test over decades. They keep repeating it, right? So women seem to be able to more connect emotionally with people. And when you connect emotionally with people, what are you able to do? You make them feel like they're part of the team, right? And they can present their ideas. And then the third one was, statistically speaking, that these collective teams, when there were more women than men on the teams, they came up with better ideas. And so actually bullet 2 and bullet 3 kind of go together. And the bottom line is when they did a test in a control group where I'm saying 10 members, but when all the team members had the highest IQ, right? So the smartest teams did not produce as good ideas as the teams that were just diverse with lower IQs. And so I love that because in corporate America, there's this huge war for talent, and they always try to get the most intelligent people. Well, it turns out you can have a whole group of the most intelligent people and they still won't be as successful as a diverse team. Does that make sense?
Sure does.
Yep.
You know why?
Why?
Because the smart people think themselves out of the answer.
Or they keep overanalyzing.
It's like the pet rock, we would say, who the hell would want to buy a pet rock?
Yeah, exactly. You need some marketing in there, and they'll say, oh, we have a way to sell that. Okay, so we're still on facts, right? So we're going to look at another fact, which is financial performance. How could it be that these diverse, optimized teams could produce better financial performance? Well, a company called McKinsey & Company, has anybody ever heard of them? It's what we would call a consulting company. And so these are super smart, the high IQ people, and they go to companies and they help them improve their performance as an organization. Some of you one day might work for McKinsey & Company. They're great jobs. So they do lots of studies, but in this study, they looked at the profits of companies that had diversity in gender in this particular case. And so what they said was companies in the top quartile for gender diversity on executive teams, so they had diversity in the top quarter of the whole companies they looked at, were 21% more likely to outperform the national industry average on operating profit margin and 27% more likely to outperform on economic profit margin. So if I were going to tell you, this lady in the red suit right here, what's your name?
Seporia McMillan.
Seporia, if I was going to tell you that you can have a likelihood of outperforming on a certain stock by 21%, and I gave you the name, wouldn't you be interested?
I would.
Right? And so here's some facts. And again, these studies have been getting done over numerous years, and they continue to report the same information back. So the key is that there's some financial performance improvement from diversity at the top regarding gender. All right, some more facts here. You know, a lot of people look at the statistics of gender representation in companies and they think, hey, things are pretty equal. You know, I see a lot of women in charge, I see a lot of women around me, but when you look at the statistics, it's just not true. So this is again from McKinsey & Company, and they call it the talent pipeline. And the way this works is at the top, it gives you the level of the position in the organization from entry level, right? So you first get the job, maybe it's a specialist or a non-management position. The next level is manager. Then you move into senior manager, director, then VP, senior VP, and the C-suite, right? So give me an example of a C-suite job. CEO. What's another C job? CFO. CMO. What's CMO? Chief Marketing Officer. At UPS, we have a Chief Accounting Officer. Chief, IT Officer. Oh, great one. Chief Operating Officer. In fact, we have an operating officer back there, right? So that's right. So that's how it's at the top. And then the numbers show you the percentage of men and women at each level. Okay, so when you start on the left, it's roughly 50-50 because if you add up the white men and men of color and the white women and women of color, it's pretty close to 50-50. Then as the people are in the jobs and you ask them, well, how many managers do you have, men and women? You begin to see, look how the women's numbers go down each rung in the promotion scale, right? And the men's numbers, what's happening to those? They're getting bigger as a percent to the total, right? So by the time you get to that lucrative C-suite with all the perks and income, you're now down to, look at that, white women 18% and women of color just 3%, right? Just so you know where I'm at, I'm right here in the director level. So I'm in the, I'm a woman of color, so I'm in the 8% group. But it just, these are the facts, right? And this is McKinsey, but there's other people doing it. So have you ever seen numbers like this before? So do you think it helps to kind of see, right, the number? So it's not that we're just like making it up. This really is the case. And if you ever have a chance, let's say you're going to go to the internet and look up an organization for whatever reason, if you go and click on their website, you can go, especially if you go to the investor relations part of the website, you can look at their board of directors and you can see the pictures of their board of directors. You can also see pictures of the top management people, that C-suite. Just click around to your favorite companies, right? Mercedes, UPS, who are some other big Atlanta companies, Coke. Just click around and you'll be surprised, right? How few women, and especially women of color there are. Yes?
Did they break down the percentage for themselves on their website?
Of course not. Right? Because they want to make it hard for you.
A slide to your presentation, checking out how McKinsey is doing.
Oh, you mean McKinsey? How they?
Yes.
Yes. You're actually right? We should go look. But I'm going to show you a video, right?
I'm trying to look.
A lot of people. Oh yeah. Why don't you do that for us? That'd be fantastic. Yeah. Check that out. Companies typically don't make it easy for you to calculate the percentages because they're embarrassed, right? However, you can look at the pictures. But unfortunately, guess what they've started to do? Not post pictures, right? Because the pictures, and look, I say this and I think people get offended, but it's just the facts, right? The pictures are very white and very male. And that's just the way the world has worked for a while, right? But I think as we understand that teams need to be diverse to get the best ideas, and why else? Because young people like you are coming to these companies and saying, you know what? We're not going to tolerate it anymore. I'm just as capable, I want equal opportunity. And so I think companies are going to have to change because people don't change for institutions. Institutions change for people, right? And I can give you a great example. At my company, jeans were never allowed. But in the last 5 years, the companies are having to change in reaction to what's happening to their workforces. When they don't like the policies, what do workers do? Leave. Just like consumers have a lot of power today, right? Through e-commerce, through social media, you basically really make companies scared because you can go on that Twitter and the Facebook and you can blow them away, right? And then they're in major reaction. So they're having to react and respond the same way and changing the policies. Another thing is we used to not be able to eat at our desk, right? Which makes total sense. It increases the cost because there's more pest control necessary, more cleaning, but people today want to work their own ways and they want to eat at their desk. So that's a policy we've changed. We have to change furniture, all sorts of things we've done. And so I think we have some power and we can use it to help influence upward. Okay, we're going to watch a video. This is the CEO of McKinsey, actually. And a lot of times companies need to lead from the top, and they don't just need to say what they're doing, but they need to show what they're doing. This guy is doing an excellent job because he's saying some pretty important things. Many people don't like to use percentages. My organization is called Show Me 50. It means show me 50% women leading. We are more than 50% of the population. We are in that talent pipeline, 50% of the workforce. And statistically speaking, free of bias, the law of large numbers says that what's at the bottom, the averages, that's how it should be at the top. And so we're going to watch this where he talks about what gender means to him and what he's doing about it.
Being a he for she champion means a couple of things for me. One is that we drive that in McKinsey, that we be a he for she place. We have gender equality. That's something that's very important to me. The second is that we play a role in the world as McKinsey in helping other organizations and institutions become gender equal. My personal click moment was actually when I was a new associate in McKinsey, and I was on a business panel and we were being asked questions. I was with a colleague who was a woman who knew about 5 times more than I did on the topic, and yet she was asked very, very few questions, and I was just astounded that this happened, and it was to me an example of implicit bias. When McKinsey achieves gender equality, I think simply what it means is that 50% of our leadership, 50% of the middle portion of our leadership development process, and more than 50% of our intake are women. That's the objective function. I also think there is the notion of trying to, again, influence the world through writing about the importance of women and equality and what it means for productivity in economies, for innovation, for dynamism. Gender equality would also mean that we are playing an important role globally in trying to help institutions realize gender equality themselves through whatever actions we can take, through our research, through our influence with leadership and so forth. I think that's a very important element of trying to help achieve gender equality.
So, what we need is more conversation publicly, like Dominic Barton at McKinsey, like John, Mr. M, who brought me here to tell you that he supports these ideas, right? And John is a white guy, and he's, a gray guy, right? But all people benefit when things are transparent, when people have the same knowledge base and can make intelligent decisions together, right? Women don't want special treatment. We just want a level playing field, just like men want, right? I know a lot of men who think differently than other men in organizations, and they too have issues that they're not included because they may rock the boat, for example, right? But it's the same concept. What we want is cultures that are inclusive and allow everyone to contribute, man, woman, and no matter the race. One point I wanted to make back on this slide. Dominic uses 50%, I use 50%. Lots of people say, 50% is where it should be. But a lot of people say, no, it shouldn't. What are some of the reasons why you think people might say, no, it shouldn't be 50%? Yes, in the back. Lady in the red t-shirt, yes.
Because then you exclude other people, other cultures, but there's so many different ones.
Okay, but if we talk just gender, let's just talk gender. What would be a reasoning? Yes, ma'am, in the pink shirt. Okay, women are emotional, and what would that have to do with not getting to 50%?
They think that we can't handle certain jobs
Okay.
because of the fact that we are emotional. We put our emotions before, I guess,
Logic, somebody said, right? Yeah. Yeah, and so, I think that's a generalization, right? I mean, maybe some people, but maybe some men are that way too, right? Somebody else had their hand. Yes, Kivia.
People are afraid of change. They're resistant to change. So they feel that if everything stays the same advantages will keep occurring. So they like for things to stay the same.
Yeah, that would be a reason why we can't get to the 50%. But what would be a reason why you think that even though women are 50% of the population in the workforce, we couldn't get to 50% in senior leadership of women? The guy in the blue shirt.
Most of those positions probably take years to achieve that type of development. A lot of women probably forego their career to be housewives or mothers.
Excellent. Yes, that's the argument that's made. Yes, ma'am.
That they're just transitioning into the workforce, into getting higher positions, like you said, and that women, maybe there's not enough experience or maybe education, or not as many women have degrees or something like that might be it.
Yes, and the lady behind you had one.
And most organizations are owned by men, and usually they select individuals of, the same.
Yeah, people choose people like themselves. We hang out with people like ourselves, right? It's hard to get over that. So some great comments there. On the education piece, that is one argument, right? People will say, well, you can't get to 50% because the pool that is 50% isn't qualified enough, right? They don't have the right degrees, they don't have enough experience. But there's a lot of studies that show that women are getting and have been getting more accelerated degrees than men for over a decade, right? Your comment in the green shirt, excellent, right? That's another argument, is that women have babies, right? And they leave the workforce, and so they lose that period, and then it takes them extra years to catch up, and so, right? Or maybe they just decide not to come back to work. But there's a lot of myths around that as well. There's lots of studies that are showing that when they interviewed men and women, they had similar rates of desire, what they call ambition to excel, right? So there's some evidence around that. The other thing is, back to my statement about diversity of collective intelligence in teams, that organizations, if you want to compete for the best talent, we're going to have to adapt the way we work. Let me ask you something. Do you want to work from 9 to 5 at your desk Monday through Friday? How would you rather work? From your home, maybe a mix, right? Maybe you want to work 4 days, 10 hours and 1 day, off, right? Maybe you prefer weekends. We want more flexibility, right? And it's not just women who want it because they have kids to take care of at home. Men are wanting more flexibility too, right? Young people, dual earning couples. So organizations are going to have to change. I think this is the last slide around facts. This guy right here, Warren Buffett. What does Warren Buffett do? Makes a lot of money. How does he make his money? Buying companies. What'd you say, John?
Makes money.
Makes money. Anybody else have comments about Warren Buffett?
Investing.
Investing, right?
He pays less tax than his secretary.
That's right. That's right. Warren Buffett has a lot of credibility out on the street with regard to financial performance and helping people build wealth. And so he's also very smart, and he appreciates the value of diversity in so far as it can increase performance on teams. And so you can see here, right, he says the closer that America comes to fully employing the talents of all its citizens, the greater the output of goods and services will be. We've seen what we can get out of the economy when we have just 50% high performance. What could we achieve if all 100% was operating at top peak performance, right? If we included everyone and they participated and contributed their ideas.
Oh, but I want to add two people to your previous slide. We had the head count.
Yeah,
This
one?
The executive vice president of the NFL is a female. And the senior executive vice president for marketing is a female. Two heading up NFL,
Yeah,
which is ironic.
and that's terrific.
We're seeing a lot more females in big blue chip companies too.
We are.
And stuff like that too.
Absolutely. It's absolutely true. We are seeing progress. It's just really slow, right? But when you see these high-profile positions, it absolutely helps. But at the same time, it can also lead people to think that we've made greater progress than we have. In another study that I read recently, when men entered a room and there were 30% women in the room, and then they interviewed them later, the men thought there were 50% women, right? So what happens is that sometimes we can be fooled into what the numbers are just because of our points of view and the way that we've experienced groups before. But it's fantastic, and I'm going to show you an example of a sports example of women rising to the top. Okay, so now we've done some facts. Any questions so far on part 1 and part 2 around the facts, or comments? Anyone want to make comments? And I really want to thank the guys in the room who are here and who are engaged, so I really appreciate that. Okay, so now let's get on to solutions. So what do you like my little image I chose? What is that thing?
That's MacGyver's.
MacGyver. It's a MacGyver's contraption. Does anybody even remember MacGyver? Is that still a show? So MacGyver was this dude, and he could take bubble gum and a piece of paper and make a parachute or something. So this pocket knife, this is like major toolbox, right? It can fix everything. There's something in here for everybody. And so that's what we're going to talk about, solutions that can help everyone. All right, so here they are. This is from Show Me 50, my nonprofit, based on a ton of research. At the end of the day, if companies would just do these 4 things, we could get to 50%, and we could get to a playing field for growth of careers that would be fair for everyone, including white men. Right? No one gets left behind. So the first one is gender bias education. It's something kind of like what we're doing right here, where we're just having a conversation about gender differences, what different people think. But you talk about giving you skills of how you can put checks and balances on the decisions we make before we make them. Right? So for example, if I am going to fill a position for a job and I'm looking at candidates, before I ever even look at the candidates, in my head I say, what's the criteria necessary to hire the person? For example, I might say education is more important for this particular job than experience. And I lock that in my head so that when I start looking at the candidates and there's a woman that has the education, I'm going to pick her over the guy who has the experience, because I said beforehand that education was more important. And that's an example of a check and balance on our unconscious biases. So the first thing is teaching employees about gender bias, not just regular unconscious bias, but gender specific. Number 2 is transparency. I mean, who can have anything bad to say about transparency, right? It just means the truth comes out, right? We're clear on all of the process. And so what this is about is making it fair for how to qualify for positions post all the jobs, right? You don't have these secret jobs that you hold behind and you give to your buddies, right? Number two, you clearly define the selection criteria. You publish all the development programs. What's a development program? What do you think I mean by that? Training, right? Earlier, I think somebody said that, what happens that sometimes women don't have the skills, haven't gone through all the training through the years. And so part of the problem is that many organizations don't disclose all of those senior level training courses, right? They keep them hidden because they give them to special people. And so what we propose and what the statistics show is that if all the information is publicized, then okay, I need to get that training. In order to qualify for that training, I need to do A, B, and C. Okay, so in 5 years, I better go do A, B, and C if I really want that senior level position. Implement diverse slate policies. What's a diverse slate policy? Anybody have any ideas what that means? What's a slate? A slate of candidates, like when you're going to go vote, right? You have a slate of candidates. So a diverse slate means that for all open positions, you require that the people have a slate of diverse candidates, right? So if there's an opening for a senior level position and the hiring manager has picked 5 white men, that someone in the organization is saying, wait a minute, you're telling me in our whole company you can't find some diversity? Is there not women who are qualified? Number 3. Gender flexibility. I'm going to get you guys involved. How about this lady in the awesome military outfit? Read the first bullet point for me.
It says use FlexTime, job sharing, and
Muting.
for business.
Agility. Right? So with this is what we were talking about earlier. How do we want to work, right? We want flexibility. And guess what? It helps organizations be more agile because you can have a mix of people working at different times when your consumers might need one person or another. Creatively design work to retain employees. Tailor jobs for the way that your people want to work, especially if they're high-performing teams. And then establish alumni programs. This is an interesting one that goes back to women taking off to go to have kids, right? Well, at the end of the day, we saw the study that says that when you have diverse teams, especially women, the teams are going to be better performers. So wouldn't you want more women to be making these decisions? So have programs where women who go out and have kids can come back, kind of have an on-ramp back into the career path, right? That's what's called an alumni because they left and now they want to come back. So how can we reintegrate women in a way that it allows them to keep going? And then the last one is executive commitment, right? The CEO, just like Damian Barton at McKinsey, has to say and do things that move the needle. All right, last one. We're going to talk about some actions that you can apply right now when you go back to your classes. Share these with your parents, with maybe in the workplace. And we're going to start off with a video example of what these actions are. And this, John, is what I was referring to. It's a sports example. Do we have any basketball fans in here? All right. So this, who do you think these people are? Oh, it's up there. Well, actually, just her name is on there. Who's this dude? Pop, right? I don't follow sports. I had to go look it up. I was like, oh, they call him Pop. And so what's the team? What city is that from? San Antonio. I was telling my husband last night, and I was like, Austin. He's like, what? Austin? He's like, no, you mean the Spurs, San Antonio. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. At least I got the state right. And by the way, this sports example is a good one. We were talking about somebody said we kind of hang out with people like ourselves. We pick people like ourselves. Well, let me tell you, at work, in my 20-year career, actually 20 plus, sports gets talked about all the time, right? Well, I just never was a big sports fan. Not that there aren't women, there are women who are big sports fans, right? But I wasn't. And so throughout my career, I've kind of been excluded from all those conversations because I'm not, kind of like one of the sports people. And so I would challenge all of us at school, at work, how can you talk about things that are not just sports or not just whatever it is you do, right? Not just basketball, not just soccer. How can we talk about things that get everybody included so we create a culture of inclusion? But that's not fun, right? Because if you're a sports person, all of a sudden you have to, you just want to talk about sports. Why do I have to start talking about gardening? Or going out to dinner, right? But if we want a world where we have collective intelligence and the smartest teams, what do we need? Diversity, right?
Hey, what a great opportunity, all right? Let's go, come on!
I'm not here unless Coach Pop kind of sees me genderless. He sees me as a person that knows basketball.
That was a good test. You got to do that. Confidence was good.
Yeah. He didn't care that I was a woman. What he cared about was, can I help the team and will I do a good job?
She talks the game. She understands the game. So in that respect, I have no doubts that she's going to be able to be one heck of a coach.
Don't get too cute out here. Stay serious, stay focused. Stop playing the right way.
Pop leaned in for me big time, and I think people want to put me on this barrier breaker. Really, Pop is the barrier breaker. I might have been the tool, but he thrust me through that ceiling.
Way to close, way to close. Now we got some energy. Let's go, keep it up.
The fact that he invited me into their inner circle was a huge vote of confidence, and I do believe leadership knows no gender.
Keep running this program. Popovich anymore. Keep running it.
Traditionally, we've been taught to believe that leaders are only men, and I think that's why it's important that little boys and little girls see women as strong and capable.
There you go. So.
There's tons of progress that needs to be made. So we all have to lean in. We can't just expect the guys to. We got to come in and support each other just as much as we want the men to. Support for the women you work with can go a long way. Lean in for gender equality.
Okay, so really the bottom line there is that this was a team effort, right? She was skilled and talented, but it took Pop to help, get her more exposure, basically, right? To get her to her full potential. So from that, a couple of last points is be a scout. Be on the lookout for opportunities where you can ask questions and take some action, right? So what do you see about this picture? All guys, right? This still happens all the time. I mean, this Mercedes picture, Mercedes just built their that was last year, right? And I'm like, when they showed that picture, I'm like, okay, how welcoming is that? Right? So where you see those types of events, just ask, hey, can we invite women to speak? What can I do to engage more women? And so here's some last action items. Be a mentor, right? Be an advocate and be transparent. What can you do to engage women and men equally in all the activities that you're involved with? All right, so that's it. So here's a checklist for you. Act, observe, be a scout, share facts and dispel myths. I think you've learned some things today that you might be able to take back to share with others. Be a mentor, be an advocate, be transparent. And what's in it for you? You have access to information about how to advance. You get work flexibility, and you'll be able to enable high-performing teams and innovation in your teams. All right, so that's it. So here's the website. I also want to ask you if you want to help me out and do something for free that costs you nothing, but it will help show me 50 a ton. This address right here, Lean In Circles, those are started by Sheryl Sandberg. Does anybody know who that is? Who is that? She's a C person. COO, Facebook, right? She wrote a book, Lean In, and started Lean In Circles. If you will go to this website here and just register as a member of our Lean In Circle, it helps us get some additional funding from Lean In. So I would sure appreciate that. So leanincircles.org, circle, show me 50 Sandy Springs. Okay, so any last questions, comments?
We have one. I want to get that Reza first before we open the floor.
Okay.
Reza, go ahead.
Did you find it?
I want to make an announcement.
Okay.
I want to start by saying I really enjoyed your talk, and I hope the students also.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. My name is Reza Keillor. I'm in College of Business, and I teach economics and statistics. I wanted to let you know that I'm also faculty advisor for Society for Advancement of Management, And if you are interested in activities in this specific organization, come and see me. We have one very exciting case competition coming up next month. And I am looking for motivated students who are interested in participating in this. Basically, I need good academic standing and also good communication skills. So these are the two things that I'm looking for. Please come and see me. My office is on 2nd floor of College of Business, 237. If you have time, I'm here every day, so you can come and see me tomorrow or next week. But the earlier the better. I have few seats available for this competition.
Can you tell us where the trip is taking
The trip is going to be going to Washington, D.C. Okay, but I really want to know if you are interested first. So that's why I didn't announce. But anyway, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I will stay here after the talk, so if you want to talk to me afterwards.
All right, we got time for some questions. Being that the first question is always the hardest, we're going to skip that one and go to number 2. So who's got the second good question?
That's funny.
So, I am pro this. However, I have a kind of opposing question.
Excellent.
Because I was thinking, is it literally a 50% thing? Because when you think about it, then you start discriminating. Because when you get down to those last numbers, and you have, say, that white male that may be more qualified than, that person, the person that makes it more diverse. How do you choose then? Because then it, kind of throws those 50-50 numbers off.
Yeah, so, when I'm talking about the law of large numbers, right, it's an aggregation, right? Each case-by-case basis, I do not advocate for quotas, which is kind of like, I think where you're going, right? It's like a specific thing where, okay, every decision, you have to do this. No, I'm just saying that at the end of the day, when you aggregate all of the numbers annually, we should see 50% women, right? And yeah, it's not going to be precise. Some years, may be different than others. But at a highest level, I think that the statistics would show that it should be 50% if there wasn't any bias inherent in the systems. But I agree with you. I don't think we should do quotas where every decision has to be 50-50. I'm sorry, what was that? Yeah, right. Yeah, that kind of thing, right. Good question, thank you. And those are the kinds of conversations we have to have, yes?
What exactly makes up the wage gap in gender? Because I heard it's something to do with maybe medical and...
I don't really talk about the wage gap that much because it's so complicated, but I did find an excellent study. It's called, write this down, Girl with the Dragon W-2. You remember that movie, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo? So it's a play on those words. So Girl with the Dragon, as in D-R-A-G-G-I-N, dragging, W-2, right, tax form. It's an excellent statistical representation, and it tells you the gender gap by issue of what's driving it. So there's some legitimate things in there. It's by a bank. I want to say it was by Wells Fargo. Other questions? One more, yep.
I know that it can be a little bit taboo to talk about, but when you talk about 50-50 gender equality, you're talking male and female. But we're living in an age where people are starting to consider themselves non-gendered. So how does that impact your movement?
No, that's a great question, right? And so, by the way, the reaction that this class just had, you got to resist doing that, right? The only way we're going to solve problems is by not making people feel judged when they ask a question, right? But it's absolutely, thank you for the courage to ask it. It's very confusing. I mean, it's like, look, we can barely keep up with the 50% thing, right? Now you're going to throw in another thing. We're just going to have to deal with it and figure it out, right? It's like, so we don't have the answers, but we have to start the conversation. I think it's an excellent point. I think many organizations, have changed policies around benefits, for partners, same-sex partners, and this conversation with the whole restroom thing, right? It's great conversations, and I don't think we have it figured out. And in my head, I'm like, okay, let's take one step at a time. But we need people who speak up and have these things come up, right? so that we talk about them and solve them. Thank you.
All right, she's going to be here a little while longer, but I want to say one thing. Thank you very much. Definitely. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank
This little
you. Look at
memento of our
that.
thing.
Wow.
All right, isn't that
It's
cool?
even got my name on it.
Yeah, I can copy.